In this session, we're going to be talking about a subject that may seem very administrative, and that's registration. In actual fact, the conversation you have around this very issue actually determines a whole lot about your event and your attendees' experience. So let's jump in. Determining whether your event should have a registration wall is one of the first practical considerations in building your event, as this will be the first thing that is built. It may be true that you can attract a bigger audience on social platforms such as Facebook or YouTube in a short period of time for relatively little cost, but the challenge with this approach is that it's Facebook and YouTube that are the ones who reap the benefits of knowing and serving your audience rather than you. The future of all media delivery is undoubtedly increased customization for the viewer. And the real question you need to be asking right now is whether you want social media platforms to be the one getting to know and serve your audience, or whether you want to be the ones doing that. Registration walls, whether they are paid or free, undoubtedly place a barrier of entry in front of any audience, and a barrier that undoubtedly reduces the amount of attendees. But on the flip side, it also significantly increases the attendees' commitment to your event and to your cause. It communicates a level of exclusivity which is often desirable, and it can significantly cover the costs of your event. Social media strategy should certainly be a component of your overall marketing strategy. However, limiting your content delivery to a single platform decreases your ability to know and to serve your audience effectively. One of the key strategies that we advise at Sardius is to host your event to your own URL and thereby increase awareness of your website and your online community. Sardius will typically host your event at a subdomain of your URL. For example, we often put like a subdomain watch.yourhomepage.com. This integrates with your online home and cements this location as a place for you to serve and interact with your audience effectively. We often advise you to use your social media channels not only to engage your audience with your message and market the event, but also to add value through broadcasting introductory or maybe free public-facing plenary or breakout sessions, which ultimately then point back to your event URL address. And maybe we say clip out certain highlights throughout the event and throw it onto your social media channels. If you don't have an extensive social media presence, it might be advisable to utilize some channels of friends, maybe sponsors or other friends that do have a significant online social media presence. And in that way, you can syndicate valuable content, which can ultimately grow your audience. Now, once you've determined that you wish to create a registered event, another key component to this decision is whether the event will include a paywall or not, and also what type of information you need to collect during this registration process. So we'll go through a few of those type of events. Let's look firstly at the free event registration. Now, that might be as simple as collecting the email addresses and names of your attendees, and some clients even provide the main sessions of the broadcast completely for free with no registration at all, but then offer many of the features of interactivity, the breakouts, maybe the post-event video on demand as perks, which come if you do that free registration. Such a free registration may be worth it to you in order for you to build your CRM database. Keep in mind that it's often advisable to actually connect the registration information collected here to your day-to-day source of truth client database so that you can make the most of the data. And also to understand how your audience has interacted with your event through the analytics, which we will address later. Once we've determined to do a registration, one of the next key questions is, should I charge for my event? Now, a paywall doesn't always mean that you have to sell tickets. An alternate option could be a voluntary suggested donation for the event, especially in the case of nonprofits, which technically for us works in much the same way as a ticket sale. Many event organizers will not actually cover the cost of the event simply through ticket sales, but with revenue from other sources coming from sponsors, donations, and other ancillary revenue channels during the event. Every event is different. For one portion of high-demand, high-ticket price events, paying the event bill is never a challenge, but for another portion of event producers, breaking even may be a very high priority for you. Now, as you would expect, the normal rule of supply and demand apply to your ticket sales. Now, more information at registration and higher ticket prices will typically lead to fewer people making a commitment and going through with a purchase. Another consideration that is often relevant for nonprofit events is that when you sell tickets, there is a requisite expectation created related to your event of a certain level of quality in the deliverables, which often includes a high-touch customer service necessity. And therefore, such organizations may choose the route of a suggested donation for a ticket instead. Now, there isn't a right or wrong approach in answering these questions. However, you should consider them alongside your main event metrics as you build your registration. The next section we're going to look at is gathering the right information for you. With any type of ticketing, you will need to determine the fields of information you wish to collect. These may include information necessary for registration and the smooth running of your event, information necessary to create a user profile in the event, and any other marketing information that is helpful for you. I'm just going to run through a list of examples of fields that you may consider, and we'll bring it up on the graphic. Name, your first and last name, email address, a full physical address, a partial physical address, country, state, postal code, telephone number, maybe social media links, a short bio, a profile picture of the attendee, a type of ticket required. You may want to suggest different types of audience journeys throughout the event. You may want to have a field for promotional codes, credit card information, and custom marketing questions and opt-ins. As we look at these fields, one of the questions that comes up, should I be concerned about privacy issues in collecting this data? As more and more companies have profited from using the personally identifiable information, PII, of their constituents, privacy concerns have become an increasing concern for any online endeavor. Now, in many countries around the world, legal frameworks have been created to protect citizens from the unscrupulous practices of certain online companies. Now, even if privacy concerns are something that you have never considered before, it's important, if you have an online presence and you collect any kind of personally identifiable information, that you give it a little bit of thought. If you have a web or an app presence, now would be a good time to develop your own privacy policy, terms of service, and perhaps a cookie policy to communicate that you are not one of those unscrupulous organizations who are going to sell data to the highest bidder. As you build the registration of your event, it's important to display these policies to your audience to communicate how you are using the audience's information. We typically find that displaying these opt-ins at the point of registration is the right place to communicate these policies. Related to these privacy issues is obviously GDPR, CCPA, and other legal requirements around the world. Now, if you have a significant audience in Europe, UK, or in California, it's important that your online event is compliant with the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, EU and UK, and the California Consumer Privacy Act, the CCPA, respectively. You are responsible as the data controller of your constituents' information. And in a subsidiary manner, Saudius Media is responsible as a data processor for your constituents. Other jurisdictions around the world have similar provisions to GDPR and CCPA, and Saudius tries to keep up to date with many of these. But we've placed an emphasis on compliance with both GDPR and CCPA, as these, up to this point, have been the gold standard in relationship to privacy compliance. Saudius will provide you with all the relative documentation, regarding how we use the information to aid in the smooth running of an online event, and will require you to give permission so that we can process your data. The next question in building your registration is, should I limit the number of devices per registration? Privacy issues are nothing to be afraid of. While you shouldn't be using the personal identifiable information for purposes for which you're not authorized, obtaining the consent of attendees to opt into your calls to action is often exactly what both you and the attendee want. Business models moving forward will increasingly rely upon the organization's ability to customize their services and communications to their clients. I find it both reassuring and convenient to walk into a local coffee shop where they know your name and they've already prepared your coffee. One barrier to collecting this information, however, is when individuals share their username and passwords. And this has been a problem that Netflix and many of the other online video platforms have to deal with. When Barry from accounting tweets out his access codes and suddenly 1,500 people are using it, you have a lot of useless information about Barry. Added to the fact that you may have missed out on selling many tickets and a lot of money. For these reasons, we recommend that you limit the amount of devices per registration. When an individual buys a ticket or registers to a Sardius-powered event, a unique token is created per registration, and that is used to create the individual event journeys throughout the event. It's also possible to restrict the amount of devices that can access the event on that token. As you build the registration, it's important to consider your goals and whether you wish to restrict each token to a specific number of devices, whether it's 1 device, 10 devices, 20 devices. Audience journeys. You may choose to develop an event where every attendee is served the same content the same way. Alternately, you may wish to create an event where the audience either chooses or is placed in a custom journey related to their audience segment. In much the same way as you have choices in an in-person event, you need those same choices online. Now, this may change what content that audience segment sees, which user interface they interact with, and which other attendees they interact with as well. You may build an event where attendees get to choose what components of the event they wish to participate in and when they want to participate in it after they've entered the event, or these choices may be made by the audience during that registration process. I'm going to run through a few examples of choices that the audience can make either before registration or after registration. The first one is audience segment. Do you have a leaders track and a youth segment and a VIP segment that needs to be served different experiences, different content than the general audience? This might be determined by a ticket type in the registration process. Secondly, breakouts. Do you have multiple breakout sessions in your event, some of which should be attended by different affinity groups? Again, it is possible for individuals to opt in to this right journey for them in the registration process and therefore make an indication of which breakout they will attend at that point. Chat watch parties. In larger events, it's not advisable to have the entire audience in one chat window. Obviously, depending on how interactive the audience is. As a rule of thumb, I always say if you have an audience over 1,000, you may consider breaking your audience into watch parties by maybe geographic region or affinity group. Selecting skilled and appropriate moderators in your watch parties can add a significant value to your event. Moderators might be subject matter experts, maybe regional representatives, or maybe in a church it might be a group pastor or a cell group leader. It's also sometimes advisable to include the actual presenter in the watch party if the video being played is actually played simulated live. And so you add that live component to the event, and so people can ask questions on the fly. One-on-one meetings is another component. Part of any event are exclusive experiences. Meeting one-on-one with subject matter experts, consultants, counselors, or for personal prayer is one such exclusive experience. While this might be decided later on in the event, it's also possible to schedule this experience through the registration process and make this part of the individualized journey for the attendee. Building your online registration. For online events, registering for the event with your organization may be the first point of contact that an attendee has with you. Therefore, there are a number of elements to think through in addition to the fields of information that you're collecting. And these ultimately relate to assets that our project managers and event managers typically ask you to provide us with. Firstly, the design of the ticketing. You need to be thinking about including your event branding in the ticket. Secondly, confirmation message once registered. This is the page that appears immediately after registration to indicate success in registration. We have some stock confirmation pages, but advise you to customize this message as it's from you to the attendee. The registration confirmation email content, this is very similar to the confirmation message we just talked about. Now, we have some examples of what good confirmation emails look like, but again, this is a message from you, so it's important to ensure you get the message and the tone correct from your organization. Lastly, the pre-event landing page. Once an individual has registered, they won't experience the full event until the day that it begins. However, it is still possible to move the objectives of the event forward with an effective pre-event landing site. This is the location where registrants will be directed to upon completing registration. It includes your basic branding elements with a written welcome message and usually a countdown to when the event will open. We also advise that in addition to any text, you include a welcome video, which can help orient your audience regarding what to expect at the event, as well as creating excitement and maybe pointing people to a specific call to action that you may have in that pre-event build-up period. This might be a temporary landing page until the event watch page is created. Now let's talk about collecting money for a moment. A number of ticketing services out there handle the payment processing of an event for a significant fee, which is often taken off the top of the monies collected before the remainder then reaches you. Now we at Sardius operate on a different model, and that's a bring your own Stripe account approach. This means that you will pay the percentage transaction fee, maybe that 2 to 3%, and then receive the income directly from your audience to your bank account. The next question is, when should I open registration? Now, some organizations have established behaviors concerning when they open registration for their events, and it would create confusion to their audience if they veered from this course. However, when no such general behavior has been established, a common question that is often asked is when registration should be opened. Now, while many aspects of a physical event and an online event are transferable, this is one area that must have a few different considerations. An in-person event will often require the audience to take time off work, or at least their day-to-day schedule if it's an internal organizational event. This often requires much more forward planning, including travel, accommodation arrangements. For this reason, it's often important to open event ticketing up to a year or more in advance for an in-person event. Added to this is the fact that an in-person event often has limited capacity at every level of the event, which could add the motivation to buy early. Now, an online event does not invade as much of the day-to-day schedule of an audience, a fact that must be considered when creating the event schedule if it's entirely online. And therefore, opening up the registration closer to the event and building a clear communication plan from the start of the registration to the end of the event and beyond is something that should be considered. For hybrid events, you may even consider opening up the online portion of the registration later than the in-person portion. While you can still utilize early bird pricing in online events have no real space limitations for the size of an audience. While you can utilize early bird pricing in online events really have no space limitations for the size of the audience. This doesn't mean that an event should have an unlimited registration. Unique limited experiences based on human limitations of breakout watch parties or VIP one-on-one consultations may create that exclusivity that is often a big selling point for an in-person event. So that's pretty much all there is for this section. So let's go through our checklist. In this session, we're going to go through all the considerations that you need to think about in relationship to producing your online event. When you design a large in-person event, much thought is often given not only to the content that is delivered from the stage in the main plenaries, but also to the design of the stage and the main auditorium. Also critical is the decor, flow, and hospitality from registration through the main sessions, the breakout seminars, the layout and the movement flow of attendees moving from main session to the exhibition hall, let's say, and finally, the time and the spacing between sessions. All of this process, along with thousands of other considerations unique to your organization, takes time and consideration. The bottom line is the way that the event is designed communicates to attendees their value and the value of the experience. Design gives us the opportunity and the ability to create the correct emotion and feeling needed to highlight the importance of the content that is being communicated in your event. Now, similar motivations must guide the approach to designing an online event. An amazing brand contained with killer design, implemented with a highly intuitive user experience, will create the difference between a good and a great event. Creating this wow factor, as we like to call it, is something that will create that difference. Your audience is typically part of your tribe. They've come to your URL to experience your event. Now, while your audience could experience your broadcast within the context of a social media platform or even a cookie-cutter platform, in such scenarios, often the platform itself becomes a dominant part of the experience. You are, in essence, meeting in, say, Facebook's building rather than your own. Now, those of the utilitarian mindset may not care for this design aspect, yet I believe, and all of us at the Sardius team believe, that it's important to think about the following components in a similar way to the way that you would consider the component parts of an in-person event. Considering the video, the user interface, which we call the UI, which is typically more about the design aspect, the user experience, or UX, which is typically more about the functionality of the platform, as well as the timing of the overall presentation that altogether determines the quality and the wow factor of your event. Now, Sardius can adopt a number of approaches when it comes to design and UI and the whole graphic design process. The first approach that we take is that we do everything. Sardius always provides the user experience functionality related to how the event works, and we can also offer professional design services, which can be limited to simply the user interface of the main watch experience, but could also be extended to creating a unique brand guide with logos, graphical assets, motion graphic assets to avoid the workload for many busy design departments, or create a unique interface for smaller organizations that may or may not have a design department. Approach 2 is that you rely for graphic design on your tried and tested in-house designers or design agency. We are very intimately aware of the visceral effect of design and how much brand and design matter to design teams and agencies of so many of the larger organizations that we work with. Outsourcing design to a new company for what may be a large communication opportunity for your organization may not be the road that you want to travel at this particular time. And that's perfectly fine. In such situations, Sardius provides your design team with the different wireframe templates and options and previous examples of event layouts and user experiences that have been successful in our experience, and invite your design team to dream about what your brand would look like in the most optimal situation, often creating a flat design that then our team brings to life. The third approach is a more modular approach for perhaps more budget-minded clients. For those more conscious of time and budget, there are also more modular approaches that we can offer in this situation, giving you dimensions of some of the design elements that are needed to be populated for an event. In this case, it will still feel like you customized, as you will be responsible for colors, images, and design elements. However, it is a stripped down approach. A list of design elements that you need to provide will be given to you by your event manager. Regardless of how the user interface is created, there are many design type elements that you will need to provide to our project management team that will be used to build the event out, and your event manager will provide you with that list. Coupled with an excellently designed user interface which effectively communicates your brand is the schedule and structure of the event, and considerations of when to present certain components of the event. Now, we take the approach that an effective online event is not a static web page with a library of video and other information that the attendee gets to navigate through on their own time, although there is a time and a place for this type of experience, and a component of it may even be part of your live event, but rather an effective online event in much the same way as an in-person event is a shared experience of different event sessions that are served to the attendees in real time in much the same way that an in-person event happens. Most events consist of main plenary sessions, breakout seminar tracks, and other type meetings. These sessions form the backbone of the event in terms of content delivery. Therefore, it's important to consider a number of factors in delivering the most optimal experience for your attendees. The run sheet or stage and content order. Before considering anything technical, one of the most important tasks you as the event producer will have to undertake is developing your event run sheet. This will require you to think through your overall event purpose and metrics, what you're trying to achieve in different parts of the event, and how do you want to structure the communications and the content flow of the event to achieve those goals. Now, traditional in-person entertainment will often build towards the best entertainer who is topping the bill, which typically happens last or close to the end of the event. While you might consider this, it may also be helpful to think of your entire event in the same way that you would consider a single presentation. Create a story arc that ultimately underlines your calls to action more effectively or helps you train your audience in sequence. One of the main benefits of online events is the ability to include presenters from around the world in a way that would not be possible if they had to travel to your event at an in-person location. There are a number of effective softwares and simple templates available to help you manage your minute-by-minute run sheet for the event. Just be aware that despite all of your careful planning, many, maybe most, run sheets won't go exactly as planned, especially if you're broadcasting significant portions of your event live. Broadcasting your event live has many exciting and important psychological benefits, of which I love, but predictability isn't one of those benefits. It's important to plan for the unexpected in your run sheet. Allowing for the unpredictable in your online schedule is something that you should be aware of. Sardius gives you the ability to create very complex event schedules ahead of time, which you will need to do. However, if you have the unexpected changes to your schedule at the last minute, you need to ensure that you are hosting your event on a platform that allows you to make last-minute changes, rather than the event being significantly cached on the attendee's machine. Sardius allows you to make those last-minute changes and work them seamlessly into the flow of your event. Now let's turn to the video production of the event. Typically for an in-person and a hybrid event, it's recognized that video production must be of a certain quality level. The same realization is not always recognized with exclusively online events. With the proliferation of video conferencing platforms, video quality often isn't given as much thought until the audience is struggling trying to follow a presenter who has filmed his presentation on his mobile phone with bad video and audio. And when we speak of video production quality, we're speaking of video camera quality, audio quality, lighting quality, background quality, and finally, broadcasting quality. Often with online events, the event producer is having to deal with presenters from diverse geographical locations. In the past, may have only been the preserve of outside broadcasts on newscasts of election coverage. Without having to produce full-on TV quality, here are a few suggestions to produce the best quality video for your event and mitigate against some of the inherent risks. Number 1, obtain a central location to film and broadcast from. Most individuals don't have access to high-quality video production gear. Now, this has changed somewhat in the post-COVID world, and even if you do, it is often wise to have a second set of eyes as a video producer to ensure quality production. If you obtain a central location to shoot the event with a higher quality production level, better equipment and tech personnel, and invite your key presenters to this location, you can limit your exposure to bad video. Secondly, pre-record the segments of your event where you're broadcasting a video conversation. There may be legitimate reasons why you need to broadcast a low latency video connection live. For example, if you require a live feedback interaction with the audience. If you don't, it may be wise to pre-record this segment, which gives you the ability to get better quality video, which could possibly be edited if there are any mistakes or video dropouts. Thirdly, ensure key presenters have better quality video recording and broadcasting equipment. The success of your events may be dependent upon certain key presenters. If they cannot be at the central location, then try and ensure that they have access to better quality video production. This might involve them traveling to a studio close to them, or it may involve providing them with better cameras, lighting, audio, perhaps a backdrop that they can record their presentation independently. Even if it is part of a live video conference conversation, this can be edited for a later simulated live broadcast. Now let's talk about broadcasting and the live or the simulated live question. The subject of whether your event should be broadcast live or pre-recorded and broadcast at a simulated live event is highly connected to the structure of your event. Having bad video can be a make or break for an online event. Therefore, this is a consistent question that the Sardius team discusses with our clients. There are a number of pros and cons to each approach. Let's talk about live. But it is these very limitations that make live events popular. It creates a psychological buzz, it results in bigger audiences, and it creates the ability to create finances through mechanisms like pay-per-view. You only have to look at the audiences for live sporting events to realize that there is a massive benefit in watching live versus the simulated live broadcast several hours later. Now, even outside of the sporting realm, live broadcasts have a certain cachet that results in bigger audiences, and despite the inherent risks involved, which we'll talk about, they give you some opportunities that are not available with simulated live or video on demand. These largely boil down to live audience engagement. And this includes interaction with questions from the audience who are posting in chat or via video conferencing, the ability to poll or to ask your audience questions and get in-the-moment responses. The risks connected to live broadcasting are related to two main factors. The first of these is the unpredictable and complex nature of an event schedule, which can mean a much bigger production budget to ensure that there are no errors in the broadcast. Secondly, the reliability of your broadcast setup, which may include all your video conferencing connections, but it's mainly related to your video streaming encoding solution and your internet connection. While Sardius can and does work with many encoding solutions, there are a few that we recommend depending on the nature of your event. These include Resi, Haivision, Telestream, and a few more that we can talk about. If you're unfamiliar with the